Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Sherston Pugh, and I'm an Associate Director of the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program in Columbia University's School of Professional Studies. Welcome to our May 2021 NECR Alumni Career Deep Dive. And if you are a current NECR student, happy first day of your summer semester. So in addition to working for the program, I'm also an alumni, and even when I was a student, I was deeply interested in the different career paths our alumni go down and how they apply conflict resolution theory, frameworks, and skills to their careers. So each month, we host an alumni who will break down for us their career trajectory, and then we'll have an open Q&A for the audience, so you have the opportunity to ask questions to our alums. And if you are a prospective student and are interested in hearing more about the NECR program, please email negotiation@sps.Columbia.edu. And so today I am thrilled to welcome Debora Delgado, who graduated from the program in 2015. Following Debora's presentation, we'll take questions from the audience, so please use the QA box in Zoom to share your questions with us at any time. We will be recording today's session, and the recording will be available on the NECR website as well as our YouTube channel very soon. And now, without further ado, welcome Debora. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Sherston. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Debora Delgado. I graduated from the program in 2015. Right now, I recently launched a consultancy business company called Binomia a few weeks ago, but I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. I was born in Lima, Peru. I went to school and studied hospitality management. It was like in 2000, tourism was booming in the country, and I thought it was like a great career opportunity. At that time, I wanted to travel the world, maybe experience different cultures. But now that I look back, I always grew up with very strong female figures in my life. And in this picture, you can see my grandma in gray. She, around 60 years ago, if not more, she opened this small restaurant in a highway, like an hour away from Lima. And she didn't get the chance to go to high school. She barely knew how to read and write because her father didn't believe that women belonged in school. But she had incredible work ethics, you know. She knew how to build relationships with her customers, everything. She was an amazing cook. Everything was everything sparkling clean. And, you know, people over the decades that the restaurant was open, clients returned all the time. They returned with their kids and later with their grandchildren. And now that I reflect on that, I think it's very important how you build relationships. And I think that's behind every success. So I think maybe I started that career because of her also. In 2008, I was in my mid-20s and I got this amazing break to work in a corporate office at Casa Andina hotels. It is up to this day the biggest hotel chain in the country. I believe at the time they had 18 or 21 hotels, and it was just me and my boss in a tiny office at the headquarters in Lima. And before I even started, I had to be like a mystery guest throughout all the hotels to experience how the service was, if I encountered any problems. And I think that was my first contact with conflict resolution. The problem the hotel chain was having at the moment is that every hotel ran their customer satisfaction independently. So if they had a problem, if they trained their staff, every hotel did it their own way. And that was a problem because you didn't feel you were going through a hotel when you were a customer. And then I also realized that I've always wanted to travel, but I really didn't know my country very much. So I think it was a good opportunity to learn how cultural differences affect us. Because, for example, every hotel, they had to hire at least 30% of their staff to be local. And then you realize that, for example, not everyone, I mean, I am from Lima, from the capital, and we have different opportunities from people that live inside the country and that already has a college degree, not already spoke like English or didn't speak like much English. And, most of our guests were from Europe and from the US. And sometimes what is common sense for us is not common sense to everybody. So we had to try to make the like authentic experiences, but also train them about how to handle complaints or how to handle requests, and to be sensitive to how people from different countries were. I think it also was a great opportunity to build relationships. For example, if you see this picture, there is this dog that I met in one of the hotels a few years ago. I was there to do a training program in Puno, in the city. And when I arrived there was like this huge dog. And when I asked about him, they told me the story. And he and his owners had been traveling in an RV throughout South America. And right in the corner, like in the border of Peru and Bolivia, they had an accident and they fell off the cliff. And only the dog survived. And the regional manager received a request from the German embassy. They were from Germany. And they wanted the family members really wanted to bring the dog back home because they consider him family. And they told me the story that the owner and the dog had traveled extensively in an RV through Australia, Europe, from many places. So they had like a very beautiful history together. And actually I agreed to return to Lima with the dog. We took a flight back home and he stayed with my family for a week. And I thought it was a really different experience because the embassy used to call me or text me every day over the dog. And I couldn't imagine like a Peruvian embassy doing that for one of our dogs, like somewhere else in the world. And actually I had the opportunity to meet this family member that came to Lima. And it was like a really, really nice connection. And he not only like brought gifts to all the employees and all the people that had taken care of the dog, but also we stayed in touch. They sent pictures when they arrived to Germany, and we stayed in touch for many years until the dog passed away years later. And every time I went to the city, the staff and the manager, they remembered. And I think it was like a great example of how you can make a difference for someone every day. It doesn't matter if you speak the same language, if you have the same like cultural background, or even if you're rich or not. I think this is the importance of human connections because like emotions are universal. So I really, from time to time I think about this story, and that's what we try to do at the hotel, like to provide unique experiences. And I think like right to this day, I want to provide those experiences in whatever I do, especially at work. And also reflecting on my years there, I ended up being a manager for my department like a few years later. And they always mentioned that, for example, like the executive board was just male. And they would say that, for example, like the CEO didn't feel very comfortable like having women on the board because like they were more emotional, or they couldn't swear in front of them, and many things like that. And that kind of made me think that my time there was kind of limited, and I started to looking into different options. And I had fallen in love with conflict resolution, but all my experience was basically like from experience and from intuition. I didn't have like the theory background. And I started looking into programs, and the one that really caught my attention was this one at Columbia. And it was the only program I applied to, and luckily I got accepted. So I moved to New York in 2014. And the first couple of months were a challenge because most of my peers, my cohort was really interested in social conflict. They many of them, not all of them, but many of them wanted to work at the UN or work for NGOs. And many of the readings and the discussions were about like social wars and, like countries in Africa. And I thought it was interesting, but it wasn't, I didn't think I could perform my best there. And well, things got better, and there were like other classes. So it just took me like a couple of months to get adjusted. And out of my whole experience, I think there were like two classes that really shaped what I do today. And one of them was interpersonal dynamics from Professor Barry Summers. At that time, it wasn't elective, but I think right now it's a required class. And I realized many things. One of them is that the things that I had been doing at work, it was take conflict, but like from outside of myself. Like I didn't realize what my emotions were or like what I thought about many things. And in this class, we learned, we had to do many self-reflection papers and stuff, but we learned like, like why we are called this way. We learned like, we took many tests, like emotional intelligence and our skills, a personality type. And it actually made me aware of my biases and of many things that are important to me, like personal and culturally. And I think that if you don't take your own emotions first before you try to, manage conflict or have like a deep conversation with someone else, I think you're set up for failure. And the other class is environmental conflict resolution. I took 2 classes with Joshua Fisher. And I think it's a really nice story because the first day of class, even before any introductions were made, they showed a video, and the video was from Peru, and it was like from a project they were doing in illegal mining in our Amazon rainforest. And when we did the introductions after, and I mentioned I was from Peru, I think there was like an instant connection. And a few weeks later, Josh asked me if I wanted to do like internship for this project he had in Peru, and that's the first taste I had of conservation and all the conflicts that are here. And I'll share more about it later. And out of the theories and frameworks that I would like to mention that are even important for me today is like CMM, like coordinated management of meaning. I think it provided like frameworks that it's a communication theory and all the things we can use and how important it is to understand where you're coming from and the way we react, the way we talk. Many of it has to do with our worldview about what experiences have shaped us. And I think it gives us many tools to kind of understand different layers that we have as humans. And the other one is like principal negotiations. I think like one of the first classes we took was Intro to Negotiation. And this book, like Getting to Yes, made me understand many things that I also had been doing from experience. For example, like, position, interests, and needs. And, many times when I was dealing with an angry customer, like I knew, for example, that we as a business were right. And I think what I wanted to do is make him realize his mistake and that he could understand my point of view and just solve it. And then I realized that the thing is not about being right. It's about like having like mutual gain. So I think the way to explain this, it may sound really simple, but it's not very simple. And it helps me in trainings and still very important to me. For my thesis, for the capstone, I did it on cultural differences in remote customer service. I had the opportunity to read this book, The Culture Map from Erin Meyer, and it really explained many things, and it was really interesting for me. I did my thesis on how Peruvian people and people from the US, how do they experience like customer service, like remote customer service. And it's very, very useful. For example, this model has like 8 different scales. For example, how depending on which country we're coming from, how do we give feedback, how do we schedule, and how we view leadership, communication. And just to give you like an example, so it can be like maybe better understood. I believe, I'm almost sure that the English language, like the one that you speak in the US, is the language that has like more extensive vocabulary in the world. For example, like more words. Even we as Peruvians, for example, many things we want to say, I find a better meaning or a better way to explain it in an English word. So that's why we use a lot of Spanglish. And that's because that makes the US like a low context country. And for example, it may be harder for people from the US to understand sarcasm or reading between the lines because you have a very explicit language. And for example, on the other end is Japan, that is high context, like fewer words that you have to read in between the lines. So what happens if someone from the US travels to work or to live in Japan? They're going to have certain issues in communication. So I think this theory and like culture theory helps us. And if we have like a multicultural team, or maybe if we're living abroad, and it actually helped me explain like many things that I, as a Peruvian, didn't understand of myself or my country until I moved to the US. So I think it's extremely important now that we have multicultural teams to get to understand about this. And I'm really appreciative that this thesis like made me dedicate many months just to understand these cultural differences. I returned back home to Peru in 2016. I wasn't really sure of what I wanted to do next, but I was sure of what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to work in an office. I knew I wanted to work with different clients, and I wanted to have many different experiences. And Josh Fisher contacted me a few months later, and he asked me if I wanted to do the monitoring and evaluation from the project that I had been working with him when I was in the US. And of course I said yes. And I had the opportunity to travel a few times to Madre de Dios, which is like this place you see in the picture. And it's like an amazing place in the Amazon rainforest. And the project in particular covered these indigenous communities that lived in a buffer zone, like near a communal reserve. And they were having like many issues. For example, there's like indigenous law here that protect them, but they weren't aware of their rights. Even the government wasn't aware of their rights. And the way they saw conflict, usually they would like physically fight with each other because they didn't know how to communicate. And this project covered many capacity building trainings. They learned how to manage the forest. They learned what was like conflict, how they could better express themselves, what emotions were at stake, the importance they had on protecting the land. And I think it's very important because it's very easy to be, an environmentalist from your computer at home. But actually, when you see everything they go through, their challenges, it's like a very different story. And I think it's they need to receive like a lot of support. And also many times NGOs or projects like these end up substituting the government because the government, for many reasons, is not able to provide like at least the basic assistance that these communities deserve. This project opened many doors for me. For example, we published a paper a few years ago in the Society of Natural Resources, and I actually got the chance to present in the IACN conference in Berlin in 2018. So this was the first project that I did with Josh and the NGO here, and it's really important for me. Another one is this project. I have a little video that I want to show, but it's still in Madre de Dios, but it was a different project. It showed the people that were protecting land, different technologies, so they could use like drones and like alerts when they were like facing different challenges. Like somebody would go into a territory for illegal mining or logging, and their territory is like very extensive, and it could take them like 3 days just to walk around their property. So it's impossible for them to know if there's a threat. And this project wanted to help them be able to manage their land.
Hace mucho tiempo conocí el lago Huitoto, un bosque maravilloso lleno de vida y con una isla encantada, escondido en medio de la región Madre de Dios en el sur del Perú. Pero lamentablemente su riqueza ha sido su condena. Durante 8 años aproximadamente, Huitoto fue afectado por mineros, taladores de árboles y pescadores ilegales. He tenido una lucha constante con diferentes amenazas, exponiendo en muchos casos mi propia vida. Me han insultado, me han denunciado, inclusive hasta me han amenazado. Pero aquí estoy, de pie, para seguir protegiendo esta hermosa selva virgen. Mi nombre es Flor Rumaina Idagua y estoy en Huitoto desde el año 2001. Sin embargo, mi esposo Gilberto Vela Cárdenas recién logró el contrato de concesión de ecoturismo el 2005 por 40 años, brindado por el Estado peruano.
Cuando conocí este lago en el año 1989, inmediatamente pensé en protegerlo y mostrar al mundo entero su riqueza en flora y fauna. Y estaba seguro que hacer un lodge y recibir a turistas me permitiría lograrlo.
Proteger una concesión en Madre de Dios es muy difícil, porque para denunciar las actividades que depredaban la naturaleza, teníamos que arriesgarnos acercándonos a tomar fotos que nos solicitaban los abogados para proceder legalmente. Estábamos expuestos a las amenazas de muerte que nos hacían estas mafias y estábamos solos, pero nos armábamos de coraje y los enfrentábamos cara a cara.
Todo cambió cuando comenzamos a juntarnos con otros concesionarios de la región. Así, el 12 de abril del 2012, fundamos la Asociación de Concesionarios Forestales, Maderables y No Maderables de la provincia del Mano, Tambopata y Tahuamano, ACOMAD. De esta manera tomamos más fuerza para expulsar a todos los depredadores de la zona.
Gracias al apoyo de instituciones aliadas, he podido capacitarme poco a poco en el uso de nuevas tecnologías. A partir del reconocimiento de las zonas más vulnerables de mi concesión, en un mapa de amenazas y riesgos, hago uso de las alertas tempranas de deforestación basadas en información de satélite que nos brinda el Estado a través de la plataforma Geobosques. Ahora estoy certificada como piloto de dron y uso aplicaciones de celular, lo que nos ha permitido reducir a cero las actividades ilegales. Y aunque la minería, la tala y la pesca ilegal acechan permanentemente, el uso de la tecnología me permite monitorear las amenazas a mi concesión, generar la información necesaria para denunciar estas actividades ilegales. Soy una custodio del bosque y me quedaré aquí para protegerlo.
What I thought was very important about this project is that also that we can't assume anything. When the project started, they wanted to introduce, as you saw in the video, the drones and how to receive alerts on their smartphones, but they hadn't considered that in these communities or these people, they had never had a smartphone before, they didn't know how to use a computer. So the first 3 or 4 months of the project was just trying to get them used to it. But I think it's great the things they have done for them. And what I think is very valuable is that, you know, people in indigenous communities particularly, they learn through storytelling. And when I would go there and do the monitoring and evaluation, you know, that midterm of the project, you could start listening to all these stories they were telling that actually weren't really true. That, you know, that they would say like the drone was spying on them like 24/7, and actually like those stories people kept telling, and the stories that kept changing from people to people, they made people stop going into the concessions, and they stopped actually illegal activities, which I think it's also important to understand how culturally it can affect the community. Of course, this project finished in December. It doesn't mean that we'll solve the problem, because there are many challenges they still face, you know, like if they're going to be able to make maintenance of the equipment, if they're going to be able to buy different technology in a few months or in a few years. But I think the most important thing here is that they are being empowered, and they know they have tools that they can protect their own land, which I think it's what I value the most. Then, like pandemic hit, and, like them and many of my different clients, like many business weren't running normally. And I saw like this opportunity. And for example, we tend to buy many things abroad, and when the economy like shut down, we could only buy things that were already inside the country. And then we were able to see many issues we had with customer service here. And that's when I had the first idea that I could do something different. And that's when the idea for Binomia started. As I mentioned before, Binomia, I recently launched it like in March, like a few weeks ago. And what I want to do is take over like an overlooked like niche. And it's here like consultancy business here usually like they cater to bigger companies, like big enterprises, and it's usually like suit and tie, like a more masculine type. And I was thinking like all these small and medium-sized companies that started during the pandemic because many people lost their jobs and they wanted to do something else, or they wanted to cover something that nobody else was doing, like who will they turn to? Like many people is really good at what they do, but they're not really good about building like relationship with clients. And that's where I thought I had an opportunity. And also I had the opportunity to interview many people from companies before like launching, and many people thought that it was just okay to hire like people who were nice. And that's why they didn't think there was an opportunity to receive training. And actually what happens when one of your customers gets really upset, and you have to manage these emotions and you have to build relationships, like you don't know how to do it. And that's where I'm trying to come in. And actually the whole world, and especially we are going through very difficult times. Besides the pandemic, we have this political unrest because, we have presidential elections in a few weeks. And the two I'm not going too much into politics, but the two candidates, like most of the population is not comfortable with either one of them. And, like emotions are like at stake, and people is like very, very upset. And last week I was having like a meeting with a potential client, and she was mentioning, what? We as a company made a mistake with a customer, and this person just called the call center, and this person was like shouting and insulting, and she was like so upset. And we made a mistake, but it wasn't that a big deal. And what happened, like this person from the call center like transferred the call to her, that is like the area manager, and the same thing happened. This person started shouting, and then like just when this person talked to the operations manager, like she kind of relaxed. And we were discussing like we have to understand that in this world we're living in right now, like this is going to happen, unfortunately. Like people is kind of, you have like your emotions like bottled, and there's no outlet to talk about that. And I think that's like a great opportunity to many skills that we have learned in the program. Because if you really want to have like satisfied employees and happy customers, you have to see us as persons, and that we are going through many different changes. For example, like I feel that right now we are blessed and we are lucky if we're healthy, if our family is healthy, and for example, if you have a job. But what happens if I want to tell someone, I'm stressed out with work. I'm tired of having to leave my house and be on a mask. I'm tired of not being able to hug people, and I feel like I don't feel okay. Usually what people will tell you, like, don't be like that. At least you're healthy, at least your family is alive. And even if you're thankful to that, I think if we keep denying that we have like a whole range of emotions that we may be feeling, and we can be grieving over different things, and that's okay, I think we are not going to improve as like company owners and as a community, or whatever you want to call it. So that's why I want to bring this new approach that that based like on emotions that we can actually make a difference. And the last thing I think I want to mention about Binomia is that in my experience in the past, like sometimes many people will tell you, you know what, I want a training. I want like a, like a 3-session training. And that's it. And what happens is that, like as humans, we learn from repetition and we learn from experience. And many times I went to do a training and supervisors or manager wouldn't attend and they wouldn't keep up with this information. And what happens after 3 weeks or after a month, you forget what you learned. And that's why I think that we have to have like a more holistic approach to this. And what I'm offering is like a program, like if you want to really be good at customer service, you have not only to be like trained in how to handle complaints, but also you have to be great at the way you communicate with them, the words you choose, and something like a little more comprehensive. And I think it's like a big challenge to maybe change perspectives, but I think I'm up to that challenge. So I think it's going to be very interesting in a few months to see how it goes. So that's my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing everything. And I just want to also say a big congratulations on the very, very recent launch of your business. And thank you for telling us a little bit more about it. And I certainly have some questions and would love to hear more about a couple of things. But if anyone in our audience would like to ask Debora a question, please do not hesitate. We have a QA box, so please type in your questions at any time. And actually, we had a couple questions that were submitted ahead of time, so I may start with those. But one of them, oops, there we are. So rewinding a little bit, what first attracted you to Columbia's NECR program? And what about the program stood out as more beneficial than other similar programs?
Mm-hmm. When I was searching for programs, I believe I found 3. One was like in Israel, and one was Georgetown, and this one. And of course, I'll be honest, like New York always sounded like a good idea, and I always thought that it would be great. But also, I think the program offered different options. So for example, it offered like conflict, all types of conflict. So I believe when I was speaking to someone about the program, they said like, you could choose your electives, and even if you, for example, you have like a business background like I did, or you want to work like in social conflict, like I mentioned, like many of my peers, you could actually tailor your program to whatever your needs were. And well, I finished like 6 years ago, and I know the program has changed. We have talked about it before. And I think you have more opportunities, and you have other like masters that you can choose electives from. So I think that's the most important thing for me about it.
Thank you. And then another question that was submitted previously: what advice would you give to incoming students on the importance of using Columbia's global alumni network for guidance and business development?
The contacts you make at the program are like very, very useful. Like I mentioned, like I still work or connect with many of the people that I have learned. But also what I like is that I think usually people at Columbia are very open, and most of them, if you reach out, even if you don't know them, like most of them will like advise you or even like have a chance to speak to you. So I think even now with LinkedIn and with all these resources, it's like easier to connect than before. But I think like I have received many guidance from people I don't know, and I think that's a very good thing you'll get from studying here.
Definitely. And also another, when you go through the NECR program, even after you graduate, we still keep you informed about events and upcoming opportunities and sometimes job postings as well. But it's done in a more personal way, not just like a newsletter, which is nice. And then we do these types of events as well that are both informative but slightly informal. Just have a conversation, and the being able to spend time with alumni is always great. So anyway, thank you to the person who submitted questions ahead of time, much appreciated. And we do have our first question from the chat box now. How hard do you think it is to monetize the knowledge you the knowledge you acquired during your master's program when you don't want to go to the public sector or an NGO?
I think like from the start, I believe like Beth and many professors mentioned that you wouldn't find like a job posting that said like conflict resolution, like most time of the time you want. But I think like a very important thing is that with the skills you receive or like you get, depending on what you specialize, you actually can work in almost anything. And I think the Columbia umbrella is very important, especially, I mean, I'm from Peru, and like an Ivy League school here is like very, very important. And I think that's a good way to monetize it. But I also think that the skills you get and how you apply the frameworks and the theory, and you actually, I mean, now that it's been a year that I finished, I think that I understand more things than I did back when I was studying. And now that I see things, you learn how to do things that I won't say like many people don't know how to do, but it's like most easy to apply. So I think it's very easy to adapt to changing times. And I feel like even now a little more confident about the things I learned back in the day. So yes, it's a challenge until you find your path and what you want to do. And then I think it gets a little easier. It actually took me like a couple of years to actually understand what I wanted to do. And what I want to think is that I think like I have like more options now, even conservation, or like if I want to work in the business sector again, I think I have more skills than before. I don't know if that answers the question. I hope so.
I certainly think so. And you absolutely touch upon this too. In the program, we talk a lot about all of, the skills and the frameworks that you're learning about and ruminating on, that it's life work. So after you leave the program, it never stops, especially when you are practicing the skills every day or bringing it, into different professions, different situations. And so, even the further away you are from the program, you realize how far you've come, because this is work that never stops. You are always evolving. And it's really fascinating. And also it's exciting to have people like you, Debora, who, graduated from the program, but are helping to sort of define the conflict resolution field, because as I think more people are now knowing what conflict resolution is, it's sort of being really recognized as a skill set that employers want. But as you said too, it can be used in so many different ways and in so many different professions. And thank you, the person who asked the question said you did answer the question, so thank you very much. Would you be able to share advice to students who are interested in at some point getting into consulting or opening up their own business, about just how to start or where to start?
Yes, actually, what was like a really good starting point for me was like last year or at first, excuse my cat, is that I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I thought I could do, but I didn't have exactly like a product to offer. And actually I started with a branding consultant, and she actually helped me shape the idea, because I think sometimes but it's like, yes, but what are you offering? And in 5 words, how can you describe it? And it's like, I don't know, I know so many things, or like I know a little bit of this and that. And I think the most important thing to start is like, what do you think you can do? What are your, what is your vision? What you can offer, and start like polishing there. And sometimes I think when you share the idea with someone that works at a different field or has a different background, will help you understand. Because sometimes if you talk to someone who knows about the same things, they will understand. But the thing is, like, people who will actually need your services if they think it's a very easy to understand concept. Because people don't want theory, they don't want like strange words, they actually want to connect. And I think you have to make sure that, and one thing other that I learned later is that you may know what they need, but actually you have to work with what they want right now. So you have to find like a balance in between. And then once you start working with them, probably you'll be able to offer more things. But it's like, I want this way because I know that's what you need, probably you won't be able to connect. So you have to be aware of both things, particularly depending on which country you are from, right? So that would be like my advice.
Oh no, that's great. And also, and keeping context in mind as well, because that is so important. And then here we have another audience question. Oh, this is great. What do you expect to achieve in the long term with Binomia?
That's a good question. I mean, I just started like a few weeks ago, but I think I would want to establish like a new way of making consultant business. So I think it's important for me to make it like a little more close, a little more feminine, and a little more like human connected. I would like to start talking about more like about emotions and about connection, because I think even if we are like a nice culture, people usually hear, if you come to the country, you say we're nice. We are not very skillful in building relationships. So I think I would like to start those type of conversations and maybe open ways for more people that do the same work that I do or similar to have the same options. So right now, I think our options are very limited. And I think the pandemic, if we're smart enough, it has taught us that we can do business a different way, a more human way. And I think I would like to grow the business. You know, right now it's just like me and a couple of consultants that I work with, but I would like to grow my business. But I think what I don't want to do is like lose the opportunity to have like really strong connections to my clients, which is what I'm just starting to do.
Thank you. I guess at this point, if there aren't any other audience questions, my final question for you then, Debora, and again, thank you for joining us today and for all that you have shared. Are there just any final thoughts you would like to share, or any general parting words of advice to our
I wanted to thank you for this opportunity because, like I mentioned before, it gave me the opportunity to think about why I chose like this career path and what happened in conflict. And I think like the most important thing for me is that, as we talked before, I think I understand more things about conflict and about emotions. So I think like what we have studied and our skill set is always going to be relevant, especially for how things are right now. And I think that we always have to keep reading and keep informing us, but I think we already have something that is very important. And I think in the future, it will be even more important than it is today. Because sometimes when we think about conflict, we think like about like war zones, and we think like conflict like outside, but you know, like conflict is within us. So we as people, we have to improve ourselves if we want to. And it doesn't mean like we are great, because sometimes I go into a conversation and I know I'm not doing what I'm supposed to, but at least I think I'm more aware. And I think that's what I'm more grateful about the program, is about being able to incorporate many things in my own personal experience and in my own relationships with hopefully it will like help me improve my relationships and keep, you know, working towards my goals. So
well, thank you so much. And, you know, I know that you will keep up doing all this really interesting and important work. So please keep us posted on it. But yeah, thank you again. And also, I just appreciate too the rare opportunity to speak with someone who has just launched, you know, business. Sometimes you hear people's reflections, you know, 20 years out, or, hey, I'm in the middle of getting this together. So it's exciting to sort of see, you know, and especially doing, you know, launching a business during the pandemic and being inspired by, you know, what was going on around you. So thanks for sharing your experience and your insights. And thank you to all of our guests who joined us today. Thank you also to SPS Events for hosting us and for making the series possible. So thank you all.
thank you very much for the experience.